I don't think that Mr. Poilievre had a chance at winning a ballot question.
We got developments here every day. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we have Brookfield begging Mark Carney for help. No, this is not a joke. This is what's happening in Canada now. We also have Quebec unanimously voting to detach from the British monarch. We got a lot of moving parts here. Let's jump into this. We've got a lot of news to get through. So we've got this one first coming from Simieritsch. The Alberta poll modeled out the UPC 61 seats, NDP 26 seats, majority for the UPC. This is good. We need a strong Alberta to help push back against Mark Carney and the Liberals. Moving on, we've got this one from Table Salt. It says, new home sales in the GTA just hit a 30-year low. They literally sold 300 homes in April for 5 million people. 100 condos. That's pretty bad. That's historically bad. What we're looking at is this over here. See how there's almost nothing? 205 single-family homes, which is this teal color, and 105 condos. In comparison, 2022, 2,816 for just condos. Got this one from Simieritsch, showing a map of North America and how religious people are, with the darker color out here in British Columbia with 50% or more being no religion. So more religion the further you get to the south and the east. This directly lines up. I'm living out here, and yeah, I don't really know that many people that are religious. I'm not religious myself. Got this one here from the Toronto Star. It says Prime Minister Carney said Tuesday he wants a concrete commitment by July 1st to partner with the European Union on a huge military industrial program, as he declared Canada must spend more on defense in a way that creates jobs in this country and contributes to its commitments under the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This can only piss off Donald Trump if he's going to be doing the rearm Europe thing and not boosting our military or our spend with America, Golden Dome, all that kind of stuff as much. Is Mark Carney using this as a negotiating tactic with Donald Trump? How long is he going to play this out? People have lost their jobs. Businesses are suffering. He needs to take some real action. Got this one here. A bus driver caught driving between Edmonton to Calgary. As the clip says, he's playing a game on his phone. He's definitely using his phone. We'll make it big screen there. So yeah, he's using his phone while driving a bus. This is absurd, dude. Like, you have multiple lives in your hands with this bus. Unreal. Take away this guy's license. I hope the boss saw this and he got fired immediately. Me too. This is going to get somebody hurt. Next up, we got this one from Kirk. It says, black mandated homeless shelter on way. City Hall confirms. Toronto officials are taking applications until Friday for City Council's new, I'm not going to say that again, the shelter that's only for a certain color of people, where everyone from employees to the homeless could be excluded based on their race. City Hall has also decreed that experience in running a shelter is not a requirement for those submitting applications. How is this not just blatant R word? How is this not? This is absurd beyond belief. We got this one from Table Salt. While the king was still in the Senate in Ottawa, Quebec voted unanimously to abolish the link between the state of Quebec and the British monarchy and to release the vote results to the king and the PM of Canada. This is savage. So this is all in French here.
Démocratique du peuple québécois, qu'elle souligne qu'une très forte majorité.
Cette motion est...
So we go to the end here when they actually vote. You can see all the green ones here lining up. This is in favor. And you'll see there's not a single abstained or nay vote. They're all green. It's unanimous. Some people here didn't vote though, but I'm not sure, maybe they weren't there. Crazy though, sending a message to the king. Meanwhile in Vancouver, we've got a $11 million house built in 1986. Who's gonna pony up the cash for this beauty? Our country's a complete clown show. We've got an update on the ostriches coming from Rebel News. This is backfiring badly now. Look at this. U.S. cancels more than $700 million funding for, I'm not going to say that M word or this V word, but you can read what's on the screen there. The bird flu pokey poke. So there's research going into this. They're canceling it because that's what this couple was doing with these birds. And now America wants to protect these birds. Dr. Oz offering up his 900-acre ranch in Florida to save the birds. I can only imagine that big farmer is royally pissed off at the Carney government at this point. During the first question period, Pierre Poilievre having a press conference, they ask him how he feels about not being in there. I think this is a great response.
I don't like it. Vous n'êtes pas à la période des questions. Est-ce que vous êtes un peu en deuil?
Today. How does it feel not being able to...
En français, monsieur, c'est correct. C'est la même question. I'll respond in both languages. Hey, I'd love to be in there. It's a great place. I love the House of Commons. I love the excitement and the thrill. And I've never really been a spectator of the House. So but I'm going to work hard to earn the opportunity to do it again. I consider it a great privilege that I've been able to do it for so long in the past. And I think the opposition has a great role to hold the most powerful people in the country accountable through question period.
That's a good response. That's nice and positive. Honestly, he's in a good position to mock the clown show that institution has become. Canadians miss seeing you there. One person Canadians didn't want to see in there is Stephen Guilbeault. He did speak once. I didn't put it on the channel. It was all in French, but here he is getting questioned in the hallway. They keep trying to ask him questions about energy. They're just looking for that juicy soundbite. He's not giving it to them.
Climate change.
There were 2 mentions of climate change and commitments to continue moving forward on nature protection.
So he's talking about the throne speech. There was 2 mentions of climate change there. As he mentioned, commitment to protect nature.
As you will recall, during the election campaign, we committed to create 10 new national parks, 10 new marine conservation area, 15 new urban parks, and accelerate our achievement of our goals to protect 30% of our lands and waters by 2030.
How much more conventional energy does Canada need? That was in the throne speech. How conventional energy? How much more conventional energy does Canada need?
I'm not the energy minister. I'm not responsible. I'm responsible for nature.
Climatique n'était pas dans le discours du front. Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez?
Il y avait 2 mentions de la question des changements climatiques dans le discours du front.
Non, pas de climatique.
Yeah, he runs away. Somebody wants this guy there. That's why he's there. This guy should not be in government. He should have never been in government. He's been there now 6 years. He's got a pension. He's a joke of a minister. The minister of orange jumpsuits. Yeah, that should be his title. Amazingly, he's not even responsible for nature. Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking that when he replied that, I was like, that's not his title. His title, as you can see here, Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture. He's still trying to tie himself to nature and climate change and all that. Canadian identity and culture. That is not nature. That is not eco-green, environmental, climate change stuff. Moving on here, we've got this bombshell news coming from the Investigative Journalism Foundation. Brookfield firms seek help from Carney days after he takes office. Calgary-based firm controlled by Brookfield wants Carney to consider it in its investment decisions. Basically, a Brookfield gas company wants help from Mark Carney. It says here, just 2 days after Liberals won the federal election, executives from companies linked to the new Prime Minister's former employer, Brookfield Asset Management, began asking for his help. On April 30th, 2 oil and gas companies owned by Brookfield joined 36 others in signing an open letter to Prime Minister Mark Carney. The group urged him to speed up resource development by easing regulations and fast-tracking approvals. For Brandon Anderson, the CEO of Brookfield-controlled natural gas company North River Midstream, Inc., it was a first, according to federal records, in more than 14 years of overseeing and contributing to lobbying efforts. He had never before contacted a prime minister directly. In the lobbying registry, he went on to reach out to Carney, asking the government to consider North River in their investment decisions. It goes on to say here, until January, Carney had been far removed from Anderson, so the CEO of this company, North River Midstream. Let's just take a look at this company on my chart here. So in Canada, Brookfield has these 2 companies, Inter Pipeline, which we can see here, they're a network of pipelines run between Saskatchewan and Alberta. And this one here, North River Midstream, it's a privately held Canadian energy infrastructure company specializing in natural gas gathering, processing, and transportation. Headquartered in Calgary, primarily operates in Northeast British Columbia and Northwest Alberta. Brookfield bought 14 natural gas processing plants from Enbridge and then created North River Midstream. So that's how this comes together. So this was done back in, you can see October 1st, 2018. So this is before Mark Carney got there. Enbridge and Brookfield Infrastructure Partners announced closing a provincially regulated portion, etc., etc. So they did this deal here, $4.31 billion transaction. So Enbridge's still around, but they sold off this part of their company to Brookfield. And you can see here, Enbridge closes federally regulated portion, yada, yada. This is back in December 31st, 2019. This one here saying Enbridge closes the sale. So this is finally by January 2020. And with that, I misspoke earlier. It's not 14, it's 19 provincially and federally regulated natural gas processing plants and 3,500 kilometers of natural gas gathering pipelines in British Columbia and Alberta. So the CEO of this company and Inter Pipeline are begging Mark Carney for help. So it said up until January, Carney had been far removed from Anderson, who's of that natural gas company. It says Andrew Stark, a political science professor at University of Toronto, explained that communications like the April 30 letter would typically be blocked by a conflict of interest screen, a safeguard designed to ensure Carney is not involved in decisions affecting the company he once chaired. Brookfield's gains and losses in North River and its dozens of other subsidiaries and properties were ultimately Carney's responsibility until he left in January, and it's likely Brookfield funds remains in his financial portfolio, which is now in a blind trust. You bet it is. He's got about $11.5 million in stock options with Brookfield. I think the guy's probably got 1 million shares or a bunch of shares, maybe 10, 20, 50, maybe $100 million of shares. How much money does Mark Carney have? The Prime Minister's office did not respond to the IJF's question. A spokesperson said that screens will ensure the Prime Minister is not made aware of any official matters or decision-making processes involving Brookfield. Oh, please. This is the same government that's wrapped up in a $400-500 million STTC scandal, funneling Canadian tax dollars to well-connected liberals, stealing our money. You think we're going to believe that they're not going to pass along messages to Mark Carney? I'm sure any of these messages would go directly through Bruce Flatt, the CEO of Brookfield. This guy here. I mean, he's been friends with Mark Carney for 20 to 30 years. Goes on to say here, if Carney did receive the letter, it raises ethical concerns. Ian Stedman, a law professor at York University, saying this. It goes on to say here, get this, it says a legal gap leaves the Prime Minister as his own judge. We need to fix our system here because this is broken and corrupt. Carney himself would ultimately decide whether any contact he had with Brookfield-linked firms violates or complies with the Conflict of Interest Act. This is so dumb. He can decide whether he broke the law or not, other than an administrative monetary penalty of $500. So if he's in fact caught breaking this Conflict of Interest Act, he'll get a penalty of $500. I believe Pierre Poilievre during the election put in a new number there. I don't remember what it was. It was like $10,000 or $15,000. It was a lot more. I remember I said something like, let's make it $50,000 or $100,000. Like it should be very high. Regardless, Mark Carney will get these penalties all day long and pay this $500 all day long. When you have millions of dollars, obviously that means nothing to him. So Stedman said, if the Prime Minister were to violate the act, Mark Carney gets to decide what to do about it. Our system is stupid and broken. This needs to be fixed immediately. There needs to be an independent administration that maybe has one of each party member and some government employees who are not members of any of the parties that all look at this stuff and then decide. Like, you can't just have the Prime Minister decide if he's corrupt or not. Justin Trudeau had more ethics violations than any other Prime Minister in history, and he just gets away with everything because he gets to decide if he's corrupt or not. And now we have Mark Carney doing the same thing. This situation is an absolute joke. Next up, we got this guy here, Bevan. This is the Liberal National Campaign, or former Liberal National Campaign director. Vassy asked him about whether the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre's direction with the election was the right one. This is interesting.
It's a minute left, but I want to get your take on each of the opposition parties, starting with the Conservatives. I know that you told our friend Paul Wells, my colleague Paul Wells, that you actually didn't think they employed the wrong strategy. The punditry class all says they didn't pivot soon enough. Why do you think that isn't the case?
Well, I mean, I think, well, first of all, I think the results speak for themselves. I mean, you know, we got 43%, they got 41%. That's a pretty successful losing campaign. I know winning matters, and I know losing matters as well, but the reality is they got 41%. They increased their seat count by 22, I think. From my perspective, from everything I saw over the course of the campaign and the weeks leading into it, I don't think that Mr. Poilievre had a chance at winning a ballot question on Trump and on the threat from the US. I mean, Mr. Carney so outperformed him on that issue. I don't know why they would have moved into our issue space and try and somehow beat us on that. I think that would have been impossible. I think that their strategy is right to concentrate on change, cost of living. I mean, so I don't think they had a strategy problem. I do think they had a leader problem. I think that perhaps adjacent to, but not the same as pivoting. I mean, obviously, I think it's well recognized that Mr. Poilievre could have been less Trumpy, as people have said, could have presented himself differently, and which would have been helpful, even if staying within the same strategy. The last thing I'd add is, I mean, I think it's a leader problem, and in a world where, you know, he lost his own Ontario suburban seat in an election where Conservatives picked up other suburban seats in Ontario. That indicates something.
That does indicate something, but it's not what he's trying to suggest. Elections Canada increased the border boundaries of his riding and added a lot of metropolitan public service voters. And Bruce Fanjoy and a whole bunch of his volunteers were going around hitting doors for, I've heard, 3 years. Not only that, Pierre Poilievre was the #1 target of misinformation, slander, and complete lies on Facebook everywhere. Big companies spending millions of dollars to slander him and people just spreading lies about the guy. People didn't vote for him in his own riding across Canada because they were lied to about him. They didn't actually even know what he stood for. So that's the main problem here. There's a lot of election interference going on within our own country, and there's no checks and balances for it. He's talking about him being less Trumpy. I mean, Mark Carney was coming out and saying, build, baby, build, sounds just like Donald Trump saying, drill, baby, drill. There's a lot of comparisons you could make too. It's just because they use that slanderous stuff to brand Pierre Poilievre as if he's like Donald Trump. Really, there's not a lot of connections there. I mean, look at Mark Carney. This is a globalist rich banker. Who's closer to Donald Trump? Is it the globalist rich banker and Mark Carney, or is it the guy who was adopted and built his life up from scratch, Pierre Poilievre? These guys are in a completely different world. Mark Carney is much closer to Donald Trump than Pierre Poilievre is. It's just because the slander's crap all over the internet. And that stuff gets put on mainstream media. It's pushed everywhere. Piles of that stuff, and it's just not true. And people didn't know who they're really voting for. We got polling data from Nick Nanos. This is looking at the individual parties and whether people would vote for them. This one is what's the most important national concern, and that's actually broken up over two of these columns here. So the highest one is this one. 20% for jobs and economy, 7.3% for cost of living. Oh, healthcare here is 8%. And the next one here, 3.5% for immigration, 4.7% for the environment. So the eco-climate nuts, they somehow think that the jobs and the economy is not as important as the environment. They also have questions here asking, would you vote for the Liberal Party? 63% said would consider, 30% would say no. Same question for the Conservative Party, 48.7 say yes, 46.6 say no. Main thing to note here, 450 people at 60 plus. So that's why you're seeing these numbers so skewed where only 30% would not vote. It's because this number over here. And same question to the NDP, 35% versus 58%. Bloc is 39 versus 54%. And the Green Party is 23 versus 67 no. And they got the People's Party in here. 7% says yes, 86% say no. Next up, we got Mark Carney's office here. Responding to Donald Trump's Golden Dome Truth Social post, says the Prime Minister has been clear at every opportunity, including in his conversations with President Trump, that Canada is an independent sovereign nation and will remain one. Yeah, okay. Don't think Donald Trump cares. Moving ahead here on CBC, we got Kate Harrison here once again, bringing some truth, bringing some honesty to the CBC.
So, Kate, I wonder about this because, there's a big defense conference happening in town, Cpac, right, which you've been at all day. Yeah. We spoke with, the head of CADC today, and you saw what David McGuinty said. It sounds like there's a big acceleration coming, and this deal with Europe, the final form of that we'll learn about in the next couple of weeks, that's going to put something on the tab, right? So, what is the value of doing a budget before you have that ironed out in the next 4 or 5 weeks?
Yeah, well, to bring it to an analogy, I want to build a house. I want to go to the bank and take out a loan. They need to know what my current debt is before they give me that loan. So I think Canadians need to know the status of the books before the government starts asking for more money, which is really what they're doing right now. They're not letting people know what the state of the current finances are, but they are asking for an additional $500 billion in new spending on defense. Like, don't get me wrong.
It's not $500 billion in new spending. It's $500 billion in spending because there's about $400 billion every year anyway.
In spending.
Right? Yeah.
But again, without that accountability of knowing the state of the current books, and I think it's because there's not a good story to tell there. And it's a lot of people surrounding the Prime Minister that were part of the previous government that led to that financial challenge. But on defense, I hope there is more investment, and it would be good to foreshadow that in the weeks ahead. But again, I don't think that these need to be parallel tracks. I think that you can give Canadians a sense of the state of the books, where you want to spend. That can be done over the course of June. The G7, the NATO, both happen in June. Continue Parliament into July.
But you need legislation, right, for Parliament to function. And if you aren't ready to have a budget, say, until August, you've only got a couple of pieces of, you got a Ways and Means motion on the order paper,
nothing
right?
Nothing says we are in a crisis like a Ways and Means motion that doesn't talk at all about defense and security, right? And to the minister's point, to Minister McGuinty's point, Canada ought not to be distracted by what is coming forward from the United States. There are things we need to be doing here, forget about the Golden Dome, to actually improve our own defense and security. We have no continental air defense in Canada. So we don't need to rely on the United States to have those conversations. We can be talking about how we can improve Canada's sovereignty and defense without waiting to hear from the White House to be making some of those decisions.
She brings up a good point. Shouldn't be spending more money if we don't know where we're at, but that's what Mark Carney wants. He doesn't want Canadians to know where we're at. This is a solid conservative position she has staked out. Couldn't agree more. We've got this one, which is interesting, posted by Philip. It says, there it is, Mark Carney has no intention to pass legislation removing interprovincial trade barriers by Canada Day, despite stating over and over again on the campaign trail that this was his goal. Canadians were promised change, but this is straight from the old Liberal playbook. So basically what happened here, Mackenzie Gray, this reporter, asked the PMO about this. They confirmed their intention is to only introduce, not pass the trade legislation by Canada Day. And they noted that the Liberal platform only promised to bring forward legislation by July 1st. With a throne speech promising to introduce trade barrier legislation by Canada Day, Prime Minister Mark Carney has seemingly shifted off of what he clearly promised during the campaign. So he's laid it all out here. Let's make this full screen. You can see here April 5th. In fact, our government has committed to remove all federal restrictions on mobility by Canada Day, free trade in Canada, free mobility by Canada Day, then by April 17th. Secondly, to commit the federal government to do its part by Canada Day, so free trade in Canada by Canada Day. April 20th, our government will do its part for free trade in Canada. We will legislate the removal of all restrictions by July 1st, free trade in Canada by Canada Day. A day later, April 21st, we'll work with provinces to make sure our healthcare professionals can work anywhere in Canada as part of our drive for free trade in Canada by Canada Day. By election night, we will build an economy, not 13, with the government committed to free trade in Canada by Canada Day.
The government promising more economic change in the throne speech.
The government will introduce legislation to remove all remaining federal barriers.
The clock is ticking on Mark Carney's so-called One Canadian Economy initiative. A lofty goal, remove interprovincial trade barriers by Canada Day. Veteran MP.
Remove interprovincial trade barriers by Canada Day. So no wonder that's why people think they'll be removed versus just legislation tabled by Canada Day. It's another lie. It's another bait and switch. Is there an official page to count Carney's lies and other deceptions? Yeah, there should be. Maybe I should add that.